Welcome back, guys, to Mr. Bell. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 true disturbing stories about cave explorations deep in the Appalachian wilderness. If you've ever wondered what's hiding in the dark below those ridge lines, stay with me. But before we begin, please consider subscribing. Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends and family. I'd also love to hear where you're listening from. Thank you all for your support. It means a lot to me. Now let's start. Uncle Len lived in this warped old cabin nestled in a hollow outside Briar, Kentucky. You wouldn't find it on a GPS. And the only way to get there was this winding gravel road with more potholes than pavement. His place looked like it had been nailed together by someone in a hurry and left to rot since the Hoover administration. Every window was a different size. Porch leaned hard to the left, and I swear the front steps groaned louder than a church pew whenever you walked up. He was the kind of man who thought refrigeration was optional. He drank his beer warm, smoked unfiltered cigarettes inside, and swore by this one wobbly ceiling fan that clanked like a metronome for lunatics. He also didn't lock his door, not because he trusted anyone, but because he figured a damn thing out here worth taking, and anyone dumb enough to try will regret it. Every summer, Mom would send me to stay with him for 2 weeks. She always said she needed a little me time, which was code for going to Elmsburg to spend uninterrupted hours with whichever boyfriend she was giving a trial run that year. I didn't mind. Len didn't hover. He'd grunt general instructions. Don't break anything. Don't start any fires. And whatever you do, don't wake him up before 9. It was quiet out there. No TV, no Wi-Fi, barely even a radio, unless you tuned it just right and held it toward the kitchen window. My entertainment options were pretty limited. Wander through the woods, throw rocks at tin cans, or sit around listening to Uncle Len's stories, which ranged from hilarious to flat-out bizarre. The one that always stuck with me, though, was about a cave. He called it Splitmouth. It wasn't on any map, not even the weird hand-sketched ones some of the old-timers hung up in the bait shop. Len said people had called it Splitmouth forever, but no one really knew why. Could have been the way the entrance sliced through the ridge like a crooked grin, or it might have been something older, something people didn't talk about much. He said he went in once when he was around 16, on a dare. Of course, made it about 30 feet before something shifted. The air, his balance, something. He got dizzy, like the cave was pressing in from all sides. Said it felt like the walls were paying attention, like something in the stone itself had noticed him. He never laughed when he told that part. Not once. Naturally, I was obsessed with it. I asked him about it nonstop. I'd bring it up while we were fishing, while he was fixing the screen door. Even when he was half asleep on the porch with a cigarette burning down to his fingers. That summer, he finally caved. All right, he said, one morning over soggy toast and a cracked plate. But if Duke won't go in, we head home. That's the rule. Duke was his dog, an old hound mix with patchy fur and ribs you could practically count. He looked lazy, but he had a bark that could peel paint off the walls. He trailed behind us as we headed up the ridge, tail swishing like a lazy pendulum. The trail twisted up between tall brush and narrow clearings, and the deeper we got, the quieter everything became. About halfway there, Duke stopped. He didn't bark or whine. He just froze. Then, slow and stiff, he dropped to his belly and let out this low growl that didn't sound like it came from his throat. It rumbled straight out of the dirt. His ears flattened and his eyes fixed on a spot in the trail that looked empty to me. Lynn called to him. Once, twice, nothing. Then Duke spun around and tore off back toward the cabin like someone had fired a starter pistol. Lynn just stood there for a second, eyebrows drawn together. Well, he muttered, that ain't good. But he still stepped forward and pulled back the thick brush. Behind it was the cave's entrance. Calling it a mouth wasn't far off. It looked like someone had sliced open the hillside with a dull blade. You had to crouch low and twist your body sideways to get through. Moss covered most of the rock, and you could feel cool air pushing out like the cave was exhaling. I was already on my hands and knees when Len grabbed my shoulder. 10 minutes, he said. no farther than the first fork. The second we crawled inside, everything changed. The temperature dropped fast. Not freezing, but wrong. It was the kind of cold that settled in your ears and behind your eyes. And the smell. Damp, metallic, like rusted pipes and stone that hadn't seen light in decades. My headlamp flickered once, just enough to make my stomach tighten. Then it steadied. Len's flashlight cut a wide beam ahead, bouncing off the slick walls. We shuffled forward in silence, footsteps soft on the moist stone. Our breath echoed louder than it should have. I started noticing these strange gouges in the rock. At first I figured they were old tool marks, maybe from miners, but they didn't follow any pattern. No symmetry. Some were deep, some shallow, and they crisscrossed like something had been dragged backward while trying to hold on. 50 feet in, we hit the fork. One path curved upward toward what looked like thinner air and daylight if you squinted. The other dipped sharply into a tunnel that looked like it barely had room for a child to crawl through. Left'll take you up and out eventually, Lynn said. Right loops a bit, and dead ends. Then he paused. Let me make the call. I pointed right. The tunnel tightened quickly. I had to lie flat an inch forward using my elbows. The rock scraped my shoulders and the top of my head. I started counting each drag of my knees just to distract myself from how close the walls were. When the tunnel finally opened into a round chamber, I stood and stretched, my back popping in about 4 places. That's when I realized I was alone. I turned around, fully expecting Lynn's light to be right behind me. Nothing. No voice. No beam. Just stone and the awful sound of my own breathing getting faster. I called his name. My voice bounced back at me. Too fast and too close. My headlamp made this faint, high-pitched buzz. I turned in a slow circle, and that's when I saw it. Another opening. Not the one we came through. Smaller, almost hidden behind a bulge in the stone. It looked barely wide enough for me to squeeze through sideways. Then I heard the scraping. Faint. Sharp. Steady. Like a fork dragged along granite. It came from that small passage. I aimed my light toward it. Nothing. But the sound didn't stop. It was rhythmic now. Slow. Deliberate. It sounded more like breathing drawn in through teeth. I stepped back, and my light caught something at the edge of the passage. A figure crouched low, just beyond the edge of my headlamp's reach. It looked human. Almost. Shoulders hunched. Back arched wrong. Limbs folded in on themselves like it was compacted into the space. At first I thought it was another kid. A lost hiker. Or maybe even Lynn playing some awful joke. Then I saw what it was holding. A red lollipop. One of those cheap ones with the white stick. Bent at the end like it had been sucked for too long. Everything else about it didn't compute. Its stillness. The way its head tilted slightly, like it was listening through the walls. And its skin. It wasn't gray or white or anything you could name. Just nothing. Like dust or old newspaper that had faded until it didn't have color left. It hadn't moved. I froze. Then it started to turn slowly. Not in a threatening way. More like it was curious. Its torso twisted first, and then the head followed. Almost mechanically. I saw the side of its face, a cheekbone, a shallow brow, and it was smiling. Not at me, not in response to anything. Just smiling. Like someone remembering the punchline to a joke they heard years ago. A private smile. I stumbled backward and hit the rock with my elbow. "Hey!" a voice shouted, loud and close. "Len." I turned toward his voice. His flashlight beam cut through the tunnel like a lifeline. I looked back. The chamber was empty. No sound. No figure. No sign that anything had ever been there except my own panicked breath and the quick pounding in my chest. Didn't speak. I just ducked down and crawled back past him, scraping my arms and knees on the stone, not stopping until I was outside again. Gasping on my back in the dirt, Len caught up a few minutes later, breathing heavy. "I didn't go in," he said. Duke came back, started barking like he'd lost his mind. Wouldn't quit. I figured something happened. I didn't say anything. My hands were shaking. The rock had torn skin off my palms, and they were bleeding in thin lines of red mixed with dirt. I looked toward the woods. Duke was at the edge of the trees, pacing like he was trying to decide whether to run or howl. Ben held out his canteen. I waved it off. We walked back in total silence. That night, I didn't sleep in the spare room. I stayed on the couch with every light on and the front door deadbolted for the first time since I had been coming to his place. I was 31 when Caleb had been hounding me about this caving trip for months. You know how some people can't let something go once it's in their head? That was Caleb, every couple of weeks. He dropped some cryptic line about this hidden system somewhere in the Appalachians. Supposedly untouched. No coordinates online, no official trail markers, no park documentation. Just a rumor that had bounced its way to him through one of his brother's ex-military buddies. He made it sound like the holy grail of underground exploration. According to him, someone had stumbled on it back in the 80s, but didn't map it. Passed the info down like some urban legend. He kept using the word pristine. Said there were chambers that had never seen a human footprint. A goldmine for explorers. He called it. Over and over. I should have laughed it off, but I didn't. We left early that Friday. Me,
Caleb,
Jules, and Tyler packed up the Jeep at 4 a.m., half asleep, fueled by gas station coffee and pure adrenaline. We weren't total newbies. Between us, we had years of recreational caving experience. Caleb was the most seasoned. He treated cave systems the way other guys treat fantasy football. Jules worked part-time as a wilderness guide up north. Tyler was ex-ROTC, always on point with gear. I mostly coordinated routes and backup plans. It wasn't supposed to be anything extreme. Just a little off-grid weekend thing. The directions Caleb brought looked like something from a conspiracy theory forum. Hand-drawn, full of symbols and side motes, like a child's treasure map photocopied until it blurred. He claimed the route started at a now-defunct maintenance trail. Sure enough, we drove until the paved roads turned to gravel, then dirt, then barely navigable brush. Eventually, the road disappeared altogether. We parked on what might have once been a fire lane. From there, it was about an hour on foot, bushwhacking through overgrowth and ducking under branches. No trail, just Caleb checking his printout like it was gospel. Then, out of nowhere, he stopped and pulled back a curtain of hanging vines. There, he said, brushing away soil from the rock face. That's the entrance. It didn't look like much. Just a narrow crack in a limestone bluff, half covered in moss and roots, barely wide enough to crawl through. Honestly, if we hadn't been looking for it, we would have walked right past. We geared up helmets, gloves, lights, chalk, backup batteries, knee pads, radios. Tyler ran the air check. Normal. All clear. One by one, we slid inside. Caleb first, then Jules, then Tyler. I brought up the rear. The first part of the crawl was brutal. 20 yards of pure belly work, arms stretched out, pushing with your toes, rock scraping against your ribs, the kind of passage that makes you question your life choices. But then it widened into a sloping tunnel just big enough to crouch. That's when I noticed it during the silence. Caves are usually noisy in their own way. Drips, airflow, the echo of your movements. But here the air was completely still. No sound, no temperature shift, like everything had been sealed off for centuries. I remember stopping and holding my breath just to listen. There was nothing. It should have bothered me more. We pushed forward, winding deeper for close to 2 hours. The tunnel shifted from cramped to oddly uniform in places, almost suspiciously so. Eventually we came across a small chamber, a sort of pocket hidden off the main path. The walls were slick with condensation, but the weird part was that we couldn't figure out where the moisture was coming from. No stream, no runoff, just this thin, wet sheen like sweat on concrete. One wall had a low rock shelf, and above it, a tight fissure about 3 feet off the ground. Caleb lit up. That's where it gets interesting, he said, already pulling himself up like he'd done this 100 times. We followed. The crack led into a vertical shaft, so narrow we had to press against the sides and twist our way upward. At one point my shoulders locked, and I had to backtrack half a foot just to shift angles. That's when I heard it, and a scrape behind me. Faint. Quick. Not echoed, just present. Probably one of the others repositioning. That's what I told myself. The shaft opened into the largest chamber we'd seen yet. Massive dome, maybe 50 feet across. Our headlamps barely skimmed the ceiling. The floor sloped gently downward into the center. Every step echoed too sharply, like the walls were swallowing sound instead of reflecting it. That kind of acoustics messes with your head fast. Then Tyler swept his light across the far wall. There. You guys seeing that? There was a hole. Round, 3 feet across, carved cleanly into the wall. I don't mean rounded like erosion. I mean perfect, like it was engineered. No dust. No debris. Just a smooth circle. Black as pitch inside. Jules didn't touch it, but she stepped up to the edge. This is wrong, she said quietly. Almost like it wasn't meant for us. Of course, Caleb dove right in. Come on. You won't believe it. Tyler followed. Then Jules. And like always, I brought up the rear. The tunnel bent slightly, sloped downward, then took a sharp turn. I reached out to steady myself and felt something wrong. The walls weren't rock. Not really. They were too smooth, too deliberate. Under my gloves, I felt grooves. Patterns, maybe. Etchings that didn't repeat. They felt planned. Then it opened up again. The new chamber looked like a bunker, a square room the size of a warehouse. Flat, seamless walls, no cracks, just lines, etched symbols and patterns covering everything. Not language, not anything I could recognize, just geometry. Sharp and exact. Caleb was in the center, crouched over something. Look, he said, pointing. Footprints, layer, but weird. Long, thin, 6 toes, perfectly shaped, dozens of them, all spread across the floor, each one clear as day, but none of them let out. That's when Jules lost it. She turned, scrambled for the tunnel, then she stopped. It's gone, she whispered. I thought she was being dramatic. I climbed over, but she was right. The wall where we'd come through was smooth. No tunnel, no CM, just stone. Tyler dropped his bag, grabbed a chisel and slammed it into the wall. Nothing, not even a dent, like hitting glass. Then my light flickered, so did Caleb's. Then Jules's went out. Battery check, I shouted, slapping mine. It flared back to life, dimmer than before. Then we heard it, a clicking noise, faint, precise, almost like footsteps, but not quite. We went still. Caleb hissed, "Don't move." I turned. Jules was staring into the far corner, whispering something. I moved closer. "There's something there," she said. "It's watching." Her light died. Then she screamed. And that was it. Not a drag, not a scuffle, just a scream. And silence. Ran. Didn't think. Just ran. Tyler yelled behind me. I kept moving. My hands scraped along walls I couldn't see. A tunnel opened up ahead. Narrow. Steep. I dove in, elbows catching on angles. Behind me, the clicking picked up. Faster. Almost eager. I kept going. Crawling until my arms shook. Until the air changed. Was cooler. Moist. Then my hand hit grass. When I looked up, I saw stars. Trees. I was outside. Somewhere else. I never found out where. Exactly. Just a clearing. No trail. No road. No one else made it back. Rescue crews combed the mountain for days. Found nothing. No chambers. No carvings. No tunnels. Just solid stone. Like none of it had ever existed. Caleb, Jewel, Tyler, still have all the gear from that day. Still in the garage. Haven't touched it since. My brother and I had been talking for years about exploring the cave systems near Ashfield Fork. Every time we saw each other, it would come up. We still haven't hit Pit 84. Huh? But we never got around to it. Schedules? Kids? Weather? Whatever excuse was handy, he's a total prepper. Prints topographic maps, color codes his notes, keeps backups of everything. Meanwhile, I'm the guy who'll see a hole in the ground and just start climbing down with a flashlight and a snack. But we meet in the middle where it counts. We both know some places aren't meant to be comfortable, and we still go anyway. A week before Christmas, both our jobs hit that rare sweet spot. Holiday shutdown, no emails, no meetings. We grabbed 2 days, locked them in, and committed. Ren came too, his daughter. She was 15, smarter than either of us, always halfway through some documentary and constantly filming everything with this little GoPro rig strapped to her chest. Kind of like a tiny, judgmental filmmaker tagging along. My wife and son stayed home. She took one look at the gear pile by the door and said, "You have fun with your intestinal frostbite. I'll be warm." Hard to argue with that. We left before sunrise. The car was already packed. Dropes, harnesses, helmets, emergency radio, emeries, foiled blankets, a full trauma kit. Ren had her own carefully labeled pack. She didn't say much on the drive, just watched the landscape blur by while fiddling with her camera settings. My brother spent half the ride walking me through cave safety protocols. Again, and the other half explaining his theory that Pit 84 might connect to a water system deeper down. The cave wasn't even officially named, just a number. Pit 84. We found it on a speleology blog from like 2008. The guy only made it 50 feet in before he bailed, said the footing got sketchy and the airflow was wrong, whatever that meant. Naturally, that made us want to check it out even more. After about a half-mile hike through bare trees and ankle-deep rock, we found it. No sign, no marker, just a jagged tear in the hillside like something had clawed it open. Narrow as hell. We had to take off our packs and belly crawl the first stretch. The air changed the second we slid in. It wasn't just colder. It felt like it wasn't moving. Like we'd stepped into a sealed room that hadn't opened in years. Once we cleared the crawl space, things widened just enough to move upright in places. We marked turns with bright orange tape. The walls had these slick, uneven shelves that made every step a maybe. Ren was unfazed. She spotted a side tunnel full of bones, mostly small animal remains, bleached white and scattered like someone had shaken a bag of dice. She knelt down, checked the light, snapped photos and grinned. "Creepy gold mines," she said. By 4 in the afternoon, we hit what the blog had called the vault. It earned the name. The passage just opened up into this massive chamber, 30, maybe 35 feet across, double that in height. The flowstone columns looked like tree trunks, frozen in place, stretching from floor to ceiling. Our headlamps couldn't even touch the top. The air down there was freezing and wet, like the cold just collected in the corners and waited for you. We were all sweating through our layers, but still shivering. It didn't make sense, but we were too tired to care. We pitched the tents and set up our little camp along the far wall. My brother got the burner going and heated up the lasagna packs we'd brought. They were these vacuum-sealed backcountry meal kits, pre-cooked and shelf-stable, supposedly safe. Ren poked at hers after the first bite and made a face like she'd just licked a doorknob. "It tastes like old pennies wrapped in wet paper," she said. Not far off. But it was warm and we were hungry enough not to complain. We played a quick round of cards, just enough to say we had, and turned in early. We had plans for the morning. One of the side tunnels dropped off sharply, and we wanted to follow it. My brother thought it might connect to an underground stream, or even a second chamber. At exactly 3:40 m, I shot awake like I'd been punched in the gut. I sat up and felt this deep, wrenching twist, like something inside me had snapped. I unzipped the sleeping bag, crawled out of the tent, and barely made it 2 steps before everything in my system decided to evacuate at once. My stomach, my legs, gone. I dropped to all fours and heaved until there was nothing left. It wasn't normal sick. It was like my body had decided it was done with being a body. I looked over and saw my brother hunched over next to the cooler, dry heaving so hard his whole frame shook. I could hear Wren from inside her tent, coughing like she'd inhaled water. Short, high-pitched bursts, almost gasping. I barely made it to the corner of the chamber before everything hit again. My hands and knees were scraped raw from the rock. Every breath felt like it was fighting its way out. I pressed my forehead to the stone just to stay grounded. Every time I moved, I thought I'd pass out. Between the vomiting and the cramps, I heard my brother groan. Something's wrong. Something's real wrong. He tried to light the burner for warm water, but his hands were shaking so badly he dropped it twice. Around 5, Wren's voice echoed across the vault. I'm stuck. I can't get out. I turned and saw her tent flap hanging open. She must have wandered out while we were dealing with everything, maybe looking for a private spot. I tried yelling for my brother, but he was slumped back against the wall, barely responsive. I clipped the flashlight to my chest, grabbed a rope and stumbled toward her voice. The tunnel she'd gone into was the one we'd specifically flagged as unstable. Slick, tight, and dangerous. I crawled in calling her name. Nothing. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it echoed louder than my voice. About 15 feet in, the tunnel dropped off, just a few feet, but steep and rough. I slid down and found her at the bottom, curled up on her side with her flashlight dimly rolling next to her. Her skin was clammy, her eyes were open, but she didn't seem to register me. When I picked her up, she didn't resist. No sound, just breathing. Thin and shallow, dragging her out was brutal. The tunnel scraped the skin off my arms. I had to move her inch by inch, feet first, stopping every few seconds because I couldn't breathe, or my arms went numb. My shoulders were screaming. I kept whispering her name. She never answered. Back in the vault, my brother was still sitting, arms limp at his sides, face pale like chalk. I tore through the gear until I found the sat phone. It took 3 tries to connect. I told the woman everything. Where we were, what had happened, that Wren wasn't waking up. She told me help was on the way. Stay where you are, she said. Do not try to leave the cave. The next 5 hours are still fuzzy. I wrapped Wren in every piece of insulation we had. Blankets, spare coats, emergency layers. My brother wouldn't move. He kept murmuring, "There's something breathing in here." You feel that? I tried to laugh it off. Told him it was probably cave pressure, temperature shifts. But the truth is, I wasn't so sure anymore. Then the voices started. Not echoes. Not the way sound bounces in caves. These didn't repeat. They moved. Just low whispers, circling, never getting closer, never leaving. I sat with the flashlight clutched in my hands and didn't say a word. My brother leaned close to me at one point and whispered, "They're behind the rocks. Don't let them touch her." When the rescue team showed up, it felt like a hallucination. They didn't waste time. Oxygen masks, IVs, stretchers. Wren went first. My brother needed 2 men to carry him. One of them looked at me and said, "You good to walk?" I said, "Yes." Stood up and immediately hit the ground. My legs were done. I had to crawl the last stretch until I saw daylight. Wren spent 19 days in the hospital. Campylobacter, probably from the lasagna. My brother was out in a week. I only needed 1 night of fluids. In the week after, we found out 4 other hikers had been hospitalized different states, same meals. It all traced back to the same company, the outdoor food supplier. Their machines hadn't been cleaned properly. They shut everything down within days. 2 people didn't make it. An older couple? They never made it out of their cave. One of them was still clipped into their rope when they found them. Wren boxed up her camera gear a month later and never touched it again. My brother hasn't gone hiking since. Sometimes I catch him staring off into corners like he's still down there trying to understand what he saw. As for me, I still go out, still hike, but I haven't stepped inside a cave since that trip. I was 22 when my cousin Delmar had finished his degree in forestry, and instead of throwing a party, He suggested something quieter and more remote. He picked a weekend hike into the southern Appalachians just across the state border, claiming there was a little-known cave system. He found it on a forum so obscure it hadn't had a post in 10 years. No official name, just coordinates, a grainy satellite image, and one cryptic message. Go in clean, come out fast. I didn't take it seriously. Delmar was always chasing these fringe things. I figured it was probably an abandoned coal shaft or a shallow sinkhole with some depth. We packed minimally. 2 days of food, a basic water filter, climbing rope, headlamps with spare batteries, and a battered shortwave radio. Delmar insisted we bring just in case. I rolled my eyes but packed it. The drive took most of the morning. No trailhead, no signs, just a gravel pull-off beside a long, decommissioned fire road and a skinny dirt track leading into thick brush. We hiked about 3 miles in, winding past toppled pines, laurel thickets, and old hunter platforms overgrown with vines. Not a soul around, just silence. Finally, we reached the ridge Delmar had marked. Beneath a shale overhang, hidden under a curtain of ivy, was a black opening, about 5 feet high. The rock was powder dry. No breeze, no sound. Just stillness, as if the cave was holding its breath. This is it, Delmar said. He ducked inside without another word. I followed. The entrance sloped sharply downward. We dropped about 15 feet to a wide ledge, which funneled into a narrowing tunnel. The dryness struck me immediately. Walls smooth as riverstone, limestone worn in sweeping curves, no water anywhere. I asked if it could have been a mine once, but he shook his head. Too rounded, no tool marks. He was right. It seemed natural and yet unnatural. The hike in was steady at first. We moved slowly, leaving chalk marks on the walls every few paces so we could retrace our steps. 100 meters in, the tunnel forked. Delmar paused, glanced down the left side, then turned right. Later, he told me it felt warmer down that path. I didn't feel anything, but as we walked deeper, the cave began to distort. Some sections echoed sharply. Our footsteps bounced and lingered. Then just as suddenly, the sound flattened, muted like we were swimming through thick fog. Our own breathing grew loud, then silent. About 2 hours in, the walls shifted from familiar gray limestone to a dull matte black. Our headlamp beams vanished into it. That's when we saw the grooves. Long crescent-shaped indentations carved into the rock at odd heights. Twisted curves not aligned with gravity. Delmar ran a gloved hand over one and said, "Feels melted." I nodded quietly. We reached a massive chamber, a dome overhead we couldn't see. The floor sloped into a pit so deep that our lights disappeared into total black. We sat on the rim, shared jerky and water, tried to make sense of it. Then we heard something. A whistle. High, brief, sharp. It didn't echo. It didn't repeat. It just existed for a heartbeat, then vanished. Delmar asked quietly, "Did you hear that?" I nodded. "Yeah, but what was it?" It felt deliberate, not random. We stayed silent. Eventually, Delmar stood and said we should turn back. Relief washed over me. But when I turned around, the passage behind us didn't look familiar. Our chalk marks were gone. The walls on both sides seemed to press inward. Everything looked untouched. No footprints, no scuffs, no sign we'd ever been there. Still, we moved. Followed what we thought was the path out. But the tunnel didn't twist like before. It sloped straight down. We passed the same tag 3 times. "479," but each time it was in a different spot. Either there were 3 identical tags, or we were walking loops. We tried joking. "I drunk, or is this cave playing tricks?" But Delmar wasn't laughing. He whispered, "We're off map." Then the air shifted again, but not with smell. It was pressure, like the cave inhaled and the walls responded. We froze. Then came the clicking. Slow, metal on metal without friction. A tick-tock pattern, not insect, not echo, controlled. Delmar keyed the radio. Static? Nothing. We pressed on. The passages changed. Suddenly angular corners. Boxy rooms with ceilings so low we had to bend. Dead ends that weren't eroded but intentionally sealed off. It felt constructed. Not geology, but architecture. After some time, we entered a circular alcove. In the center lay 3 zipped sleeping bags arranged in a triangle. There were 3 old packs beside them. Delmar opened one to check. Inside, moldy paperback novels, old food wrappers, a battered flashlight. No names, no IDs. One bag had a knife jammed into the stone next to it. We unzipped them all. They were empty. No sign of a person. No crease on the bags. No indentation or fabric wrinkling. On the wall, deeply etched letters read, "Go back." That was it. We didn't hesitate. We left instantly. Only the cave had changed again. Passages we'd been down were missing. Some tunnels had collapsed. Others led into tighter, darker stretches. The clicking returned, pulsing, rhythmic, like it was trailing us. We switched off headlamps for a moment. Total darkness. That clicking was close. Uncomfortably close. Then I heard my voice. Behind us. Echoing. "Delmar. This way." But I hadn't whispered a word. I froze. Delmar stared at me, wide-eyed. Then again, my voice further in. "Over here," he whispered. "Run." We sprinted, no map in mind. Just out. My legs felt like jelly. My chest burned with breath. Finally, we spotted pale blue light, maybe dawn filtering through a crack. We crawled through a narrow fissure, barely wider than a crawl space. And there, just above a forested cliffside, we emerged as light crept in. Dawn. We turned back. The opening was gone. Solid rock where ivy hung before. No coordinates matched. The ridge wall was sealed. No entrance. GPS erased. Tracks vanished. Delmar refuses to talk about it. Deleted everything. I haven't entered a cave since. Not even a tourist one. My cousin Milo had this ratty topographic map he swore was the real deal. Picked it up from some old guy selling knives and belt buckles at the Salina flea market. It was so crumpled and faded. It looked like it had been through a washing machine. There was this single hand-drawn pencil line running straight through a section of national forest, just west of Timber Hollow. No marked trails, no ranger routes, nothing printed. Just a straight line like someone had carved a secret path through the map. He was obsessed with it. Said it pointed to a cave system nobody had mapped. Something off the books. Not the kind of cave you tour with a group of middle schoolers and a flashlight. He kept saying it was old. Older than anything we'd find in park records. This place was never supposed to be found, he told me once. Totally deadpan. Over coffee, like we were talking about traffic. I agreed to go mostly because I didn't think we'd find anything. Figured we'd camp out, maybe hike a little, and Milo would realize he'd been sold on a hoax. We packed up his Wrangler, loaded down with climbing gear. Food, lights, batteries, the whole 9 yards. He even brought glow sticks, a chalk marker, and a GoPro he clipped right to his chest, like we were filming an expedition for YouTube. We parked on this beat-up stretch of forestry road that was more weeds than gravel. The GPS had cut out half an hour earlier, and we hadn't passed another car in at least an hour. I remember looking around and thinking it felt like the kind of place you'd lose your way in fast if you didn't have a plan. From there, it was just trees. No trail. We followed the slope of the land based on the crude line Milo had traced from the map. It took maybe 40 minutes of cutting through brush and navigating overgrown stream beds before we found what he'd been looking for. The sinkhole. It wasn't obvious at first. Just looked like a patch of thicket. But when you stood right over it, you saw the depression like an eye socket punched into the earth and left to grow over. The sides were steep and thick with vines, the kind that snapped loud under your boots. Milo's face lit up like he'd just won the lottery. He dropped the rope ladder without a second thought. I wasn't thrilled about dropping into some unknown pit on a rumor in a flea market map. But Milo was already halfway down before I could object. "Look stable," he called up. I clipped into the harness and went after him. The descent was rough halfway through. The walls squeezed in, scraped my pack, pressed in tight. Then suddenly, we dropped out into open space. The chamber we landed in was massive, not like a cathedral or anything dramatic, just huge in a way that felt unnatural. The light from our headlamps barely touched the edges. No bats, no water, no moss or damp stone. It was dry as bone and totally silent. We started marking our path immediately. Arrows and chalk every 20 feet. Glow sticks clipped to the rock every 50. Milo was always like that. Careful. Precise. He kept talking about formations, patterns, how untouched the place seemed. I didn't say much. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't supposed to be there. The deeper we went, the weirder it got. Every time I expected to see a puddle or hear a drip, there was nothing. Even the echo of our footsteps sounded wrong, like it was being swallowed too fast. We found side tunnels, but they were shallow, dead ends, holes no bigger than a dog kennel. Then we found the arch. It was perfect, 10 feet tall, maybe 5 feet wide, cut directly into the stone. Not rough or uneven. It looked like something had carved it clean. The edges were smooth. Too smooth to be natural. There weren't any stalactites or buildup. Just bare rock, almost polished. Milo reached out and touched the inside edge. Something's been through here, he said, frowning. He pointed out the gouges. Long, narrow slashes carved deep into the stone, spaced like claw marks. They were angled forward, not down, like something had dragged itself through. More than once. Caves don't do that, he said again, almost to himself. We kept going, but slower now. The air got stranger, dry, brittle. The tunnel felt wrong under our boots, like the ground was layered with something delicate. Every step gave off this faint crunch, like we were stepping on insect shells. The walls had this flaky, glassy look. If you stared too long, you'd see veins of something silver running just beneath the surface. And those veins, they pulsed only when you looked directly at them. Look away and nothing. Look again, and they moved faintly. Then the radios cut out. No warning, just a pop of static and dead air. We both tried new batteries. Nothing. Milo tapped his headset, shook it, gave up. Keep moving, he said. The tunnel started to spiral downward. Slow and wide, not a natural spiral, more like a designed ramp. Everything started to feel heavier. My gear, my legs, even my thoughts. And we walked into the chamber. The walls arched around us in ridges, 12 of them, evenly spaced, smooth, rising up and over like a rib cage. That's what it looked like. A stone rib cage. The floor was smooth and bare. No debris, no dust, no glow sticks, no chalk. I turned around. The tunnel we'd come through gone. Just a blank wall. Milo turned in a full circle, slow and stiff. We didn't pass any turns, he said. His voice sounded small in that space. Check the wall. Nothing. The chalk marks we left completely gone. Not even residue. Like they'd never existed. Then we heard it. 3 dull knocks. Not like steps. Not like anything I've heard in a cave before. Just flat sounds. Flesh on stone. Deliberate. Spaced out. We froze. Then another sound. A long, slow drag. Something moving across rock without urgency. Milo whispered, lights off. We killed them. In the dark, it felt like the space around us tightened. Another knock. Closer. The drag again. Louder. Then we ran. We lit flares and just ran. No plan. No direction. We found a new tunnel that sloped sharply down. It felt like it was pulling us more than we were running. My knees were screaming, but I couldn't stop. At some point, I realized Milo's light was gone. I yelled, no answer. I turned around and ran back. I don't know how I didn't trip. I found his flare still burning on the floor. Next to it was a streak. Long, smooth, unmistakable. Like a body had been dragged away. No gear, no harness, no backpack, just that one streak in the dust. I picked up his flare and ran. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I just moved. Time got weird. I couldn't tell if it had been minutes or hours. Every tunnel looped. I saw the same markings over and over. Only they weren't mine. Then I found the ribcage room again. Only now the ceiling was gone. It was just a shaft, straight up into blackness. My flare didn't reach the top. I stood there for what felt like forever, heart pounding, convinced something was waiting above me, watching. Then I saw it. Another arch, bigger and glowing faintly. Same shape, just brighter. Too bright. I didn't question it. I ran straight through. No thinking. No checking gear. No stopping. When I came out, it was blinding. Daylight. I collapsed on a slope, hands shaking. It wasn't the place we'd entered. I was about 2 miles east of where the car was parked. No trail, no opening behind me. I hiked back on instinct, totally numb. When I got to the car, Milo's gear was in the trunk. Neat, packed, boots clean, but the ladder was gone. We went back twice after that. Once with the Forest Service, once with a guy Milo knew who flew drones. No sinkhole, just trees. Micah and I had been friends since high school, though friends might be a bit generous. We weren't close back then, just orbiting the same social black hole, mostly ignoring each other. But during our first year at Crescent Valley Community College, we both joined this half-baked outdoor rec club, and something clicked. He had that twitchy, encyclopedic kind of mind. Half chaos, half Wikipedia, a walking rabbit hole of survival trivia, fringe geology, and weird rabbit trails from Reddit. He wasn't the easiest person to be around, but he made everything feel like it might lead somewhere no one else had ever gone, and sometimes that was enough. While other students were out chasing shows in Blue Brook or hanging out at bonfires, Micah was clambering into storm drains behind grocery stores or sneaking through condemned quarries in the middle of the night. He once skipped midterms to try and follow a dried-up creek bed because he swore it matched a pattern he'd seen on an old map from the 1940s. He loved old mining reports like they were religious texts. He kept printed copies of obscure surveys in a beat-up folder labeled openings. He started calling himself a spelearchaeologist, which I think he thought sounded cool. It did if you didn't ask too many questions. I liked hiking. I liked being outside. And he was fun in a live wire, what the hell is he about to say kind of way. But then, right after spring break, something shifted. I noticed because he stopped inviting anyone to come along. He'd vanish for entire weekends and show up at the next club meeting with a scabbed forehead or a torn sleeve, and an odd smile like he'd seen something worth not explaining. I asked once where he'd been. He said, underground. I laughed. He didn't. Later that week, he sent me a photo. Just a narrow, sharp drop-off. Black void swallowing the beam of his flashlight. Blurry. No scale. Underneath, he'd typed, found a room. She lives there. Thought it was a joke. So I texted back, who's she? He didn't answer. Things escalated after that. His posts got stranger. Short videos with strange angles, shaky footage of walls marked with spirals or gouges, things that looked like tool marks, but didn't line up with any real pattern. His voice would occasionally cut in, whispering things like, she remembers the cuts, or it changes shape when I'm not watching. One clip was just his face reflected in a wet wall, staring blankly while he breathed into the lens and said, she doesn't like lights anymore. I almost unfollowed him then. Not out of fear, just fatigue. Then L showed up in our geology course. He was an exchange student from Busan, quiet but sharp and clearly smarter than anyone else in the room. We got partnered for a semester-long mapping project, and after a couple awkward labs and a pizza run, we started actually enjoying each other's company. She had this way of listening that made you feel like your words were being archived for later study. But she was warm about it, not cold. Kind curiosity? The real kind. Micah met her exactly once. It was during a hike the club organized in April, up through the lower basin of Eagle Spine Ridge. She didn't talk much, just scribbled in her weatherproof notebook and took pictures of soil stratification. Micah barely said hello, but afterward he looked at me and said, "She has cave eyes." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to know. A week later, we all ended up at a student mixer, which was mostly warm soda and awkward hovering near cheese trays. That's when he cornered Elle. He pulled out his phone, opened one of those weird videos, and started talking fast, like he'd been saving it all for that moment. He told her about recursive tunnel paths, about the perceptual trick of unbending rock. He said something about how the Earth forms intentions over time, which even by his standards was a new kind of bizarre. Elle was patient, asked a few technical questions, nodded politely, but I saw her expression when she walked away, not scared, just unsettled and curious. In a way, I didn't love. Micah watched her leave. Didn't follow. He just whispered, "She fits," and smiled like he was quoting someone. 2 weeks later, he sent us coordinates. No address, no name, just a string of numbers and a note. No markers. You'll know it when you see it. Bring a light. She's calm lately. I was ready to ghost the whole thing. But Ella looked up the terrain data, cross-referenced the elevation, and said it might be a rift cave. A good one, possibly undocumented for the project. She said we don't have to stay long. So we went. The drive was 2 hours, give or take. We turned off near Riverton, then followed some half-forgotten lumber road until we hit a clearing walled in by brush. Micah was already there. His car looked like it hadn't moved in days. The cave entrance wasn't visible until you ducked past a thorny wall of brambles behind a moss cavern boulder. There was an old couch spring tangled in the roots nearby. He called it Mother's Mouth. When I dropped into the entrance, the walls closed around me immediately. Slick stone. Tight angle. The flashlight I brought blinked once before settling into a dim, hazy beam. Micah moved like he'd practiced the route 100 times. Smooth, confident, too quiet. He ran his fingers along the walls as he walked, muttering occasionally, pointing out tiny carvings. I couldn't quite make out. Elle followed, notebook out, measuring each turn. I brought up the rear. Always leave someone behind you just in case. Light vanished completely after a few bends. Then the passage opened into a low, round chamber, barely taller than I am, with walls that curved in like the inside of a bowl. The air felt thick, like it had weight. My phone lost signal the second I stepped inside. Micah turned to us, beaming. This is her room. The walls weren't just scratched. They were carved. Some marks looked like they'd been etched over and over again until the stone wore smooth around them. Long spirals, jagged loops, shapes that almost looked like branching veins. No formations, no crystal, just clean, cold geometry. Ella crouched down and ran her fingers along one of the marks. Bison glacial, she murmured. Too deliberate. Too, what's the word? Intentional. They are. Micah said, she made them. Elle stood. Who made them? He pointed to the far wall. That's her face. There was no face, just a bulge in the rock, almost like a fossil that never finished forming. I said, cool. We saw it. Let's head back. Michael didn't move. She's not done yet, he said, and pulled something from his backpack. A small figure. Maybe bone? Maybe something older? Long limbs? No eyes. Wide, gaping mouth. I made this, he said. She asked me to. Ella stiffened. I don't want it. Micah stepped toward her. You already do. I grabbed his arm. He spun, shoved me into the wall. My vision went black around the edges. Then Elle screamed. I turned and saw him pressing the thing against her chest. She needs you, he whispered. You're hers. Elle kicked him in the shin and twisted free. He stumbled. I lunged, tackled him. He hit the ground hard, but never stopped smiling, never even blinked. His flashlight hit the rock and went out. We fought in the dark. I felt something warm on my hand. Blood. Maybe mine. Maybe his. He stopped struggling, yanked me to my feet, and we ran. No talking, no thinking, just running. The tunnel felt longer than before. At one point I turned and saw him again, just standing in the dark, like the cave had grown him. Elle pulled me harder. We broke through the brambles into fading sunlight. Collapsed by the car. Didn't speak until the locks clicked shut. We filed a report that night. Rangers checked it out. They found the cave entrance, verified the first bend, but the chamber wasn't there. Tunnel ends at a collapse, one said. No side rooms. Nowhere to go. Micah never came back. No messages. No sightings. His car got towed 2 weeks later. Nothing else happened. Elle and I still talk. Once in a while, we avoid the word cave. I was out there on a research grant from Eastmont University, working on a project documenting undocumented cave systems along the ridge corridors that threaded through that part of eastern Appalachia. Glamorous work, right? Not really. Mostly it meant long hikes through wet brush, busted knees on jagged limestone, and scanning outdated surveys while trying to make a dent in a half-baked regional archive. I had been out there for over a week with Camden. My partner on the trip, he was the kind of guy who could rethread a busted descender in the dark, which I respected. We split responsibilities. He managed the gear and rope logistics, and I handled the spatial data, drawings, measurements, topographic sketches, the brain and the brawn, more or less. We had already logged 3 minor cave structures, shallow, linear, boring. Camden kept calling them limestone disappointment tubes. So when we found the crack behind the old chapel, we knew we were finally looking at something different. He spotted it while scouting the back wall, where a chunk of stone had slumped in on itself. He waved me over. "It's vertical," he said, brushing moss off the edge. "Can't see the bottom. But it's clean." Like a split, not a collapse. It looked tight, maybe shoulder width, but something about it gave me pause. The seam didn't look worn or eroded. It looked surgical. A straight, narrow incision into the ridge. There wasn't a single sign anyone had touched it before. No tags. No climbing bolts. No old glow sticks or trash. We took it seriously, logged its coordinates, snapped preliminary shots. We labeled it Morrow's Hole in the notes, mostly because it sounded better than Chapel Crack. Whether it was ever called that officially, I couldn't tell you. No records. No local lore I could find. It just felt like it wanted to be named something. We began our descent just after 10 a. Camden went down first to test anchor points and clear the shaft. 10 minutes later, I followed. The rope was solid. Anchor bite was strong. The shaft was bone dry, which was odd for that area. No seepage. No mold. Not even mineral buildup. It opened into a tight chamber at the bottom, maybe 4 meters wide with smooth dry walls and no sign of water action. That alone was strange. But what really stuck with me was how untouched it felt. Caves like this usually have some evidence of human presence. Trash, carvings, crushed beer cans, some dumb initials. Here, nothing. No disturbances, no signs of life, just silence and rock. We moved through a series of crawl spaces, narrow enough that our pack scraped the walls. Eventually, they widened into a chamber with an arched dome maybe 10 feet high. Camden whistled low when he saw the ceiling. "Dry as a bone," he said. "These pockets used to drip. Probably. Not anymore." The walls were off. Not layered like normal limestone. They curved inward, like ribs. Smoothed. Deliberate. You could almost believe someone shaped them. Camden said it was clean limestone, but I didn't buy it. It didn't look natural. More like a cavity made from the inside out. Right then, the radios gave out. We'd been using short-range units, strong enough for twice that depth. 1 second we were coordinating rope placements. The next it was all static, dead air. Camden frowned, tapped his mic. "We're not deep enough to lose signal," he muttered. "Maybe 60 meters down?" I nodded, trying not to overthink it. We moved deeper. Eventually we crossed a stone ledge, maybe a meter wide, suspended over a pitch-black drop. I dropped a rock. Nothing. No clink. No bounce. Just gone. Camden didn't like that. He looked back. That should have echoed. On the other side of the ledge, the tunnel twisted left, like it was curling away from us. We rounded the bend, and that's when Camden froze. You hear that? I didn't. Something scraping behind us? He said, aiming his headlamp down the tunnel. Like stone on stone? We turned. Silence. Empty tunnel. I marked the wall with a chalk X, and we moved on. Then we found the chamber. It was perfectly centered, like someone had planned it. In the middle, a square structure rose up to waist height. Not natural rock, man-made. The stone had been stacked intentionally, almost polished. At the top was a circular basin about the size of a dinner plate. Carved into the stone, inside it were etched spiral patterns, tight, repeating grooves that coiled outward in perfect symmetry. Camden leaned in close, tracing one with his glove. These were carved from the center out, he said. You'd have to twist your whole arm the wrong way to do it. I didn't respond, just marked the coordinates and took photos. The chamber had 3 exits. We picked the center one. I dropped a glow stick by the entrance. Roughly 30 meters in, the incline steepened fast. Too fast. I pulled out the inclinometer. It says we're at 15 degrees, I said. Camden looked at me. Feels like 40. He was right. It felt like the ground was pulling us forward. I tried leaning back. Still slipped a little. It was like gravity didn't care what our instruments were saying. Let's turn around, I said. We did. The glow stick? Gone. And the tunnel behind us had changed. Tighter. The walls dipped differently. Even the scrape marks from our gear were gone. Camden pulled out the compass. The needle spun twice, then stopped. Pointed west, stayed there, no matter which way we turned. We walked, quiet. Eventually we found another chamber. Dead silent, not quiet, soundless. I clapped. Nothing. Not even a muffled return. Our own breathing felt absorbed. Camden pointed at the floor. 2 long drag marks, parallel, human-sized, coming in from opposite tunnels and stopping in the center. No prints, just the trails. He mouthed something. I couldn't hear it at all. Then the vibration started, not from beneath us, from the walls. A low, steady pulse, like a hum buried in stone. We left, took the right-hand tunnel, and stopped caring where it went. Every few meters I saw the same pattern, same chip in the wall, same yellow mineral streak. I started making marks. 5th repetition, I stopped, counted. 6 marks already? I had made 6. And in turn, suddenly, his face had gone pale. There's something on your hood, he said quietly. I reached back. Nothing but dry fabric. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking up. I aimed my headlamp. A hole had opened in the ceiling. Perfectly circular. Smooth edges. No debris. No fracture lines. Just blackness. Camden stepped back. I saw a hand, he whispered. It bent the wrong way. We didn't talk after that. Just ran. The tunnel tightened. We crawled, scrambled, barely fit through some of the squeezes. My knees were bleeding. At one point, Camden shouted, and I heard him. There's light ahead. Faint natural light filtered down through a shaft. I recognized the pattern of stone. It was the original entry pit. But the rope, it wasn't ours. Different weave, thicker, dusty, frayed, looked older, rotten. I yanked it, held. Camden didn't hesitate. Climb first. I followed. The entire way up, I felt like something was rising with me, just behind, waiting for me to look down. Camden reached the top, turned, grabbed my arm, and yanked me out. We collapsed on the forest floor, gasping. The sunlight stung. The position of the sun wasn't right. We'd gone in at 10. It was now just past 6. We'd packed in silence. No talk, no logging. Just shoved our gear in bags and left. Was 21 when it happened. The guy's name was Vaughn. I came across him on one of those old-school caving forums. Basic layout. Black background. Neon text. No real moderation. Half the posts were just GPS coordinates without context, or threads where people argued endlessly over rope thickness, or bragged about depth records nobody could verify. It wasn't the kind of place I normally hung out, but I was chasing leads for a cave mapping side gig, so I spent a lot of time lurking. One night, out of nowhere, Vaughn messaged me, said he had access to a limestone cave system that wasn't on any state charts. Down in southern West Virginia, called it Slant Hollow. Said the land had belonged to his grandfather until the coal companies bought up most of the mountain. Locals won't go near it, he wrote. They use the woods all the time, but not past the tree line. Old superstition stuff. I've been in. Not far, though. Never past the second bend. That got my attention. Most of the caves I scouted turned out to be dead ends. Sinkholes filled with leaves. Abandoned mining shafts sealed off or crumbling. Vaughn's message didn't read like someone trying to impress anyone. He was plain clipped. And his claim that nobody had charted the system? That's gold in my line of work. We met in person 2 weeks later. Just past noon on a Sunday. Gravel pull-off near a place called Frakesburg. He was already there when I arrived. Standing by a dusty old Jeep checking gear. Looked younger than I expected. Mid-20s maybe. Shaved head. Sharp eyes. Weathered clothes that didn't look trendy or expensive. Just well used. He nodded at me when I got out of the car, but didn't bother with small talk. Just pointed to the tree line and started walking. The trail was barely there. More like a memory of a path. Brush pushed down long ago and never growing back right. It snaked along the bottom edge of the ridge, winding between rocks that didn't seem like they should be there, as if the whole hillside had shifted. I didn't hear a single bird, not even a bug. The cave entrance was hidden, wedged behind a stone outcrop under a shelf of dirt and roots, like a split in the skin of the earth. You wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it. Vaughn had wrapped an anchor line around the base of an old dogwood tree nearby. 15-foot drop, he said, and disappeared into the darkness. I checked my watch before following. 2:46 p.m. The descent was steep, but manageable. My boots hit the floor of the cave with a dull thud. No echo, just the sound of cloth and gear brushing against stone. The walls were narrow, sharper than most caves I'd been in. Not damp, not mossy, dry and brittle, like the inside of a fossil. The air smelled like dust that hadn't moved in decades. We chalked the entrance wall and started the descent. I marked direction and time. Like always, every 100 feet. Vaughn didn't. He walked like he already knew where he was going. Carried a barometer clipped to his belt, plus a second flashlight on his chest strap, but he never looked at them. We hit the first chamber 20 minutes in. It was weirdly symmetrical, dome-shaped, maybe 12 feet high. I called out to test the acoustics, but the sound just dropped off. No echo, like the air swallowed it. Vaughn turned, like he was hearing something else. Your ears feel funny, he asked. Like it's bigger than it looks? I didn't feel anything, but I remember rubbing my jaw, wondering if the pressure was playing tricks on me. Still, something about that space made me uneasy. It wasn't anything I could name, just a kind of heaviness in my limbs. Like gravity was different there. We found a side tunnel and kept going. It was tight, had to crawl in parts, but passable. About 10 minutes in, the passage split again. We marked the fork and picked the left-hand path, figuring we'd double back and check the other later. The air seemed thinner there, not enough to choke, but just enough to make breathing feel like work. The tunnel opened into a cramped side chamber, barely high enough to crouch. Vaughn moved ahead, then stopped. There's a bag here, he said. Canvas, military surplus type. Forest green, water damaged. He pulled it from a gap in the rock, and we dumped the contents onto the floor. Clothes, stiff with old sweat. A busted flashlight. A cheap folding knife. A plastic bottle filled with cloudy water that smelled rancid. And a spiral notebook. Most of the pages had melted into each other, but Vaughn flipped through carefully. Near the middle, He found 3 short lines that hadn't faded. Still deeper. Thought I turned around, but I keep ending up here. Can't tell if I'm going down or sideways anymore. I sleep, but don't remember. Lights out. Woke up with dirt in my mouth. Something moved in the last room. Not alone. That last line made something tighten in my chest. Vaughn didn't say anything. Just kept reading those 3 sentences over and over, like they might change if he stared hard enough. Then his headlamp flickered. He smacked the casing. Nothing. Darkness. "I've got a backup," he said, voice low. I turned my beam toward him. The shadows shifted strangely. Too tall. Too stretched. Like they were bending around corners that weren't there. He pulled the spare from his belt, swapped the battery, inflicted on, then froze. On the wall behind him were scratches. Fresh ones, long vertical gouges, too clean to be erosion, about 3 feet each. Grouped in tight, uneven pairs, they looked carved, deliberate. We hadn't seen them when we first entered the chamber. We turned and crawled back in silence. No discussion. Just pure instinct. But 10 minutes later, I knew something was wrong. The walls didn't look the same. Textures were smoother. The air felt colder. And all our chalk marks were gone. Not rubbed away. Gone. Like we'd never touched the walls. The tunnel forked again. This time there were no signs. No sense of direction. We hesitated. Then picked left again. 20 more minutes? Maybe longer. My thighs ached, and my fingers were shaking so bad I had to stop and stretch them out. My watch still said we were under 2 hours in, but it felt like we'd been crawling for days. Then we saw the boot. Just one. Mud-caked and torn open. The toe peeled back like wet cardboard. No sign of who it belonged to. A little farther down, a headlamp. Same model as mine. Still blinking. Low battery. "You think someone else is down here?" asked. Vaughn didn't answer. He was staring at the walls again. New scratches. Higher up. Aligned in precise rows. Not frantic. Not random. Like someone or something had been keeping track. We pushed on. I don't know why. There wasn't anywhere else to go. Then light came from up ahead. Amber and flickering. Like candlelight through gauze. It didn't make sense. There were no torches. No lanterns. Just this glow seeping from the stone itself, as if the rock was giving off light. Vaughn stepped toward it. "Don't," I said and grabbed his arm. He pulled away and walked into the room. I stayed just outside the threshold. He stood in the center, staring up. The scratches were on the ceiling now. Dozens, maybe hundreds, like a message I couldn't read. He whispered, "I've been here before." He looked dazed, empty, like he was underwater. I grabbed his backpack strap and yanked hard. He stumbled back into me, flinked and sucked in a breath like he hadn't been breathing at all. We ran. No words. Just movement. No words. Half movement. Eventually the stone changed again. The scratches disappeared. The walls felt older, dustier, familiar. Then we saw a yellow mark, one of ours. It flaked under my fingertip, but it was there. We followed it step by step until we saw the rope climbed up. Crawled out. The sky was dark, cold. My watch said 5:32 p.m. Vaughn's phone said 1:03 a.m. He didn't say a word the entire drive back. When I dropped him off, he didn't even say goodbye. Vane and I weren't exactly professionals. We weren't even proper hobbyists. We just had a shared addiction to crawling into places that common sense said we shouldn't. Old mines, storm drains, limestone cracks, barely wider than our shoulders. We chased anything that felt hidden, forgotten, or vaguely dangerous. This one started with a survey Vane found, some ancient black and white document buried in an old digital archive he'd stumbled across at 3 a.m., probably while half asleep on Red Bull. It described an abandoned coal corridor somewhere in eastern Kentucky. The section we cared about mentioned a collapse near a decommissioned spur line. and noted a nearby cave system. No topography, no maintained trails, just a pair of coordinates and a note scribbled in the margin. Entrance sealed, instability unresolved. That was all Vane needed. He messaged me 2 words: pack light. We parked as close as we could, ditched the rental car near an old cattle gate, and started hiking through what used to be farmland. It was thick with dry brush, overgrown fences, and rusted-out farm equipment half swallowed by thorns. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. 3 hours in, we finally found it. A crack in the rock face, vertical, jagged, wedged between 2 shale outcroppings like nature tried to hide it on purpose. From a distance, you wouldn't even notice it. Up close, it barely looked wide enough for a person. Vane grinned like a kid seeing snow for the first time. "That's it," he said, pulling the rope from his pack like he was about to rappel into Disneyland. I stared at the crack and, for one hopeful second, thought, maybe a rattlesnake will show up and make this decision for me. Instead, I clipped in and went first. The shaft was tight, 20 feet straight down, then a hard elbow turned into a crawl space. I had to twist sideways just to get my shoulders through. The tunnel ahead was all stone and skin. I pulled myself forward with my elbows dragging my legs behind. Every movement made a scraping sound. The walls were unnaturally smooth, like something had worn them down deliberately. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. I don't do well with tight spaces. Never have. Vane knew that, after what felt like 20 minutes of inching through a concrete birth canal. The passage finally widened. I crawled out into a larger space and stood up. My breath fogged a little. The air was cold, heavy. The headlamps caught the chamber wide, arched maybe 30 feet high at its peak. The ceiling had that skull-like curve, like you were standing inside a hollowed-out head. But right in the center of the room was something completely wrong. A pillar about 12 feet tall, smooth, gray, perfectly vertical. It didn't look like any kind of limestone formation. It was too clean. No cracks, no deposits, just a tall ash-colored cylinder rising out of the ground. It didn't reflect the light. It swallowed it. Vane caught up, took one look at it and said, "That's not part of the cave." He stepped toward it. I grabbed his arm. "Don't." He gave me a look, but didn't argue. We stood there for a while, just watching it. It didn't do anything. It didn't need to. Eventually, we crawled back out and set up camp just outside the entrance. Neither of us said much over dinner. The woods were eerily quiet. No bugs, no birds, just an odd, empty silence. Sometime after 2 a.m., Vane shook me awake. He looked pale, like he'd been dunked in cold water. "You go back in," he asked. I blinked at him. "What?" "Just now. I heard you in there. I heard you laugh. I was asleep." I yelled down. "You didn't answer." Then I heard something. Your voice. But wrong? He was shivering, even though it wasn't that cold. I told him he'd been dreaming. He didn't push back, but didn't look convinced either. We went back in the next morning. He went first this time. As I dropped into the main chamber, I immediately noticed what was missing. The pillar, gun, in its place was a hole. A perfect circle about 6 feet wide. Dead center in the chamber floor. The edge was impossibly smooth. I asked, "Was this here yesterday?" Vane looked just as rattled. "We missed this?" "We didn't miss it." "No way." Still, we clipped the rope and dropped in. It felt deeper than it should have. I counted seconds out loud, at least 30 before I hit the bottom. The chamber below was narrower, darker. The walls were slick, like they'd been oiled. The smell was metallic and damp. We walked slowly, our boots making almost no sound, not even an echo. About 10 steps in, we found the markings, dozens of them, deep gouges in the rock, jagged, horizontal, all at strange angles. Not writing, not pictures, just marks, arranged in patterns that made your eyes feel wrong if you stared too long. Under the headlamps, they shimmered faintly. I leaned in. They weren't carved. They'd been melted. Vane took out his phone started taking photos. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. From above, slow, unsteady. Something dragging. Vane shouted up. Nothing. Then a second later, the sound came back. His exact voice. Same inflection. Same words. But off. Just slightly. Like someone copying a sound they didn't quite understand. I looked up. There was something at the rim. A face. Pale. Smooth. No mouth. No nose. Just two hollow pits for eyes. It blinked. I turned off my headlamp. So did Vane. We backed into the corner of the chamber, trying to disappear into the dark. My hand brushed against something cold. A key ring. Bold. Rusty. It made no sense. Then it climbed down. No rope. No handholds. Just this smooth, grotesque movement. Its limbs bent too far the wrong way. It didn't look around. It didn't need to. It went to the center of the chamber and crouched. Then it started mimicking, or breathing, the scrape of our boots. Then, Vane's laugh, the exact one he'd mentioned hearing the night before. Stretched, distorted. It started crawling toward us. Vane whispered, "Run." We didn't run. We crawled, fast and stupid, into a crack barely wide enough to fit our shoulders. It couldn't follow. It just stood outside the opening, tilting its head like it was studying us. Then it said one word, again, and turned around. We waited until we couldn't hear anything. Could have been an hour, maybe 2. Then we bolted, got to the shaft. The rope was gone. Not just unhooked, vanished. No marks, no anchor. I nearly puked. Vane looked like he was about to faint. But somehow, miraculously, he had a spare rope. Emergency backup tucked away in his pack. He never let me forget that afterward. We re-anchored, climbed fast, didn't speak until we got to the car. I finally asked him, "What did it say?" He shook his head. "I don't know." Then he added, "There was another rope on the other side. New. Same brand as mine." I stared at him. "So, it went deeper." "Why didn't you follow it?" "Because it was moving." We re-anchored, climbed like hell, and didn't stop until we were both out of the shaft and on solid ground.